This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread, and today we're going to begin our deep dive into the subject of building operations for maximum value growth. Now, for the last 30, 40, 50 episodes, we've been talking about growing the value of our companies. And you've more than likely heard me rant about the Wall Street type financial people who want to build value in investment accounts. And that seems to be all they're focused on. I told you the story about whenever I was running my very first business that I had some extra cash and I wanted to invest in my business. So I went to a quote financial advisor and he said that I had to put it in stocks and bonds. And there's nothing against stocks and bonds. I manage millions of dollars in assets for our clients here at our registered investment advisor, Heritage Investors. But we want to grow the value of our company. For many of us, the value of our company is often our largest asset. So we want to know what it takes to grow the value. So we've been on a series on growing the value. And today we've come to the point to deal with operations. I've titled today's episode, Operations Department versus Operation Systems. Operation Department versus Operation Systems. So whenever I say the word operation, perhaps your mind goes back to the childhood game that had the patient laying on the table that you had to take the plastic bones or different things out of his body. And if you hit the little metal pieces, then his nose would light up and the game would vibrate, rather aggressively. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a medical procedure here. What I'm talking about is the flow of your business. And to illustrate this, I want you to put your mind back to grade school. Many of us in grade school, we had or we saw or we've seen an ant farm. The little ants that ultimately end up getting your pants and biting you, and it makes you really upset. So you end up stripping in the yard and dousing yourself with a water hose, especially if you're from the South and you deal with this thing called a fire ant. For those of you who live in the South, in God's country as I call it, you maybe have experienced these painful little insects, the fire ant. Yes, I speak from experience. I have found myself many times in a fire ant bed, only to be standing not very long after that, next to the water hose with nothing but my drawers on, spraying all the fire ants off my legs and other parts. But nonetheless, an ant farm, like we've seen in our school classes or like we've seen on YouTube, they're a perfect example of operations. If you notice on an ant farm, if you ever had one, I can remember the very first one I had. In fact, I was talking to my wife about buying one for our children for Christmas so they could see this thing in action. But if you ever had an ant farm, you'll start out with the sand or the soil within the little glass slivers, and you'll pour your ants in on top of the farm. And before too long, the ants will begin tunneling, and they'll begin moving dirt. And as you watch it, you'll have ants that are at the forefront plowing the way. They're grabbing grains of sand and they're climbing back over the backs of their comrades who are following them, and they're moving the sand from beneath the surface now to above the surface. If you ever watch them in detail, it's a perfect example of operations at its finest. Now, we know that ants are communicating. You can actually watch them with their antennas if you get close enough with a magnifying glass. You can see how they move around. If you bump a table, you watch how they react. But there's communication going on. But more importantly, they're walking toward one common goal. Oftentimes it is for procreation. They're there to expand their colony. But nonetheless, it's a perfect picture of operations. Business Dictionary says operations transform resources or data inputs into desired goods, services, or outputs, and they create and deliver value to customers. So that's the operations. In my simple terms, we're basically going to get the customer what they want. What are the processes to deal with that? So in today's title, I titled it Operation Department versus Operation System, and I have to deal with the two O's. We're going to call Operation Department the big O, as in the Operations Department. So operation management is the administration of business practices to create the highest level of efficiency possible within an organization. And it's concerned with converting materials and labor into goods or services as effectively as possible to maximize the profit of an organization. Operation management teams attempt to balance cost with revenue to achieve the highest net operating profit possible. And that is a direct quote from Investopedia. As you know, I write for Investopedia. I answer a lot of their questions there for readers. I saw one of my comrades actually had a very good definition on operations. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. That gives a very good summary of operations. So basically, the operation department's job is to administer best practices to create a high level of return for profit. And you say, Justin, look, I don't have an operations department. I have a business with 25 employees and I am everything. Well, friend, you are the operations department then. So I want to talk to you about what the operations department is overseeing. And in many small businesses, we don't have the luxury of hiring a full-time operations manager. Now, as your business grows, it's one of the tactical moves that you'll make. In fact, I'm working with a small business owner right now that had $1 million profit this year. Great year, up about 30% over last year. And one of my recommendations in the new year is going to be to build out his management team and to take some of the profit, reduce it down for company viability, to build value, if you will, into the company. And so in the operation management or the operations department, they're going to oversee many different things. So they're going to oversee design and engineering. They're going to oversee account and order management. They're going to oversee project and production management. They're going to oversee procurement or the onboarding of new clients or orders. They're going to oversee the facilities, the tools and tech, resources, field ops, distributions, packaging, customer service, IT, talent, training, master data, management, reporting. That is what operations department is overseeing. You say, Justin, I don't have one. Okay, friend, then if you're a small business owner, it is your job, or you're hiring somebody, or you're subrating this out to where you're overseeing the design and engineering of the product or service that you are offering. You're overseeing the order management. You're overseeing the project management, the onboarding of clients. You're overseeing that. The facilities management. If you have property, then you're overseeing that. The type of tools that you use, the technology, the resources, the field operations, where your crews go, where your customers go, where your employees go. The distribution, the packaging, the customer service, all this rests on you. And at that point, you said, dude, I don't have any of those things. You know, for a small or a mid-sized business, an operations department can often be wanting. Now, when you get into a middle market business, companies that typically have revenues in excess of $5 million, operations is often the most efficient area of their business. In fact, it scores in the highest typically of middle market businesses. And that's because you have things like Six Sigma. You have lean for manufacturing companies. There are consultants who are constantly looking at just-in-time delivery systems, Japan-style matrix. There's all different sorts of books written on operations and how to become efficient within the operations department. But in a small business, you and I live this. Friends, I don't have the time, the resources, nor the money to hire a procurement individual just to manage procurement, just to manage the onboarding of clientele. No, that rests upon our team. I don't have the time, the energy, or the resources to hire a field ops manager or a manager of sales personnel in the service industry. I don't have time, resources to deal with the tooling or the tech, to have somebody just to go out and look at technology and vet it for me in our organization. I don't. So that's left up to me, or it's left up to parts of our team, which is why for small business owners, and when I say small, again, I'm going back to $5 million in revenue or less. For us small business owners who consist of 7.3 million businesses in the United States, an operation department, the big O, the big operations department, is often a pipe dream. However, the operating systems are reality for us. So the term operating system refers to the standard or the company-wide collection of business processes used in our organizations. And that's a quote directly from Wikipedia, which, by the way, when I went to Wikipedia today, they say to all of our U.S. listeners, we want you to give us $3, the cup of coffee, and that'll keep you available. I think that's an interesting way to ask for money, just for what it's worth. But back on task. the operations, or the small o, the operation systems, is something we all can work on. And by working on these operation systems within our small business, we are ultimately building ourselves where a manager at some point, as our company grows, a manager can come in and help us with these operating systems. And there are many type of business coaches who will help us with various types of systems. I was actually listening to a coach who deals with the financial planning industry. There's only a handful of true planners out there that operate in the registered investment advisor world. There's a lot of brokers who want to sell stuff, oftentimes lousy stuff, but there's a lot of brokers who want to sell stuff, but there's only a handful of registered investment advisors. And I was listening to a consultant talking about some of the operational improvements we can make in our registered investment advisory practices, which I thought was very intriguing. My point in that is that there's often people we can hire to help us in the various systems. But many times it is the systems which are lacking the most in our small businesses. So I want to spend this next few episodes dealing with the operating systems, building the operations of our firms or our practices or our businesses or our whatever particular type of company you have, building it for maximum value growth. The operation systems of a small business are often the things which hold back and stymie the growth that we need.
You are listening to Financially Simple, destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner.
So I want to leave you today with these 10 tips as it relates to operations. And we're going to spend time over the next few episodes diving deep into what operations are, what we can do within our own organizations to grow the operations, to grow the systems for scalability purposes, and ultimately to drive value into our company. But I want to leave you with these various tips that I have that I want you to think about as we go through these next few episodes. Tip number 1. Operation includes both people and processes. See, if you think operation is just processes, then you're mistaken. It takes people to carry out those processes. I've seen the engineering types that graduate. I actually knew one individual that had a mechanical engineering degree and then went back and earned an MBA and then tried to start a small business. And they could never get past the scientific, mathematical textbook solutions often don't work because people are involved. And so operations, the systems that you're building, have to be built for people and processes. Just a tidbit we'll talk about. And with that, just keep in mind that people, number 2, are often the largest cost of an organization. They often are. So if you can get your processes in place, then you can often reduce the cost of the people if you get them done right. So you can reduce the cost of your people. And with that, number 3, people genuinely want to do good work. I often hear business owners fuss, and I've been known to do this myself, about the ability for us to hire good people. I'll hear that as the number one complaint for small business owners. Justin, I cannot find any good people. I would argue that oftentimes it's not the good people. It's that we don't have the process in place for people to come in and do the work that they want to do. So the work is often not good because the systems are not complete. Think about that. Number 4, there are very, very, very few, if not sometimes no, quick fixes in the operations of an established business. So if you're a business that's been around a while and you've got some decent revenue flowing, chances are you have some pretty decent operational systems in place. However, in small businesses, those with $5 million or less, there's often much room for improvement. You say, well, Justin, I've been around a while and I'm under 5 million. Then friend, more than likely, operations is one of the areas that's lacking the most in your business. It is. It just is. And the reason for it, guys, is we're just burning the candle at both ends. We don't take time. Often we have the mentality, if we're going to get something done right, we got to do it ourselves. I'm sure you've heard that. You may have even said that. That's not operations. Operations is building a scalable model. Operations number 5 is not rocket science because most of us actually do it in our heads. We know what it's like to hire somebody. We know what it's like to bring on a new customer. We know the process for bidding it out. We know the process for delivering our good or services. We know the tech or the tools that we're going to need. Today in my head, I can do an irrigation system, tell you the exact layout, the parts and things, exact tools I'm going to need down to the exact count. So it's often process is not the problem. The operations is not that hard. We just need to systematize what we have in our head and then trust the systems that we've already built within our knowledge base that we store as business owners in our head. My number 6 tip is small wins build motivation. So if you make a small operational win, it builds motivation. However, the larger wins, the big task that you're able to accomplish by improving your operations, drive return on investments. They're the ones which drive the value or increase your intrinsic value within your organization. The 7th tip, number 7 I have for you, is that if you feel like you need help, if you feel like you need more clients or more employees to help you, it's often not a lack of ability within your team. However, it's often a time versus resource problem. I'll give you a case in point. We implemented a new CRM system. Our old CRM system was very antiquated. And so over the last year and a half, 18 months, we've been implementing a new CRM system. That system took some time. It took some time to implement, and we're probably only about 80% implemented at this phase. But what we were looking at before was we were going to have to hire 2 more people to handle the flow. And now here we are some 18 months later, and we actually have the same exact personnel type carrying 2.5 times the flow that we had before. So many times when we look at we need a new employee to help us with the flow, that's not always the case. Many times it is not a time or resource, it's a system problem. The 8th tip I have for you is that the hidden issues in your business is often not able to be seen by you, the owner, or management for that matter. You say, Justin, I have managers. More than likely, the problems within your company you can't see. And you're like, dude, I know my company. Yeah, you know the symptoms, but you don't know the true underlying problems. And it goes back to that iceberg effect. We talked some probably 8, 9 episodes ago about where the majority of the iceberg is underneath the water, and senior management or the owner often only sees about 4% of the true problems. That's the true reason, friends, right there, number 8, is why we hire coaches. That's why Michael Phelps has a swim coach. I know I use Michael Phelps a lot, but there's a very good point that we can apply to business, and that is none of us know everything. And we need people to be looking at the things that we can't see in our blind spots. And the true issues of the business are not often seen by the owner or by the management. The number 9 tip that I have is that we're trying to mitigate risk. We're trying to mitigate operational failures. We're not trying to perfect them. We're not trying to perfect the systems. See, oftentimes we business owners are reactionary in nature. We'll see a problem and then we go and put that fire out only to try now go put out another fire. Whenever we step back and we actually try to build the operational systems which add value, what we're doing at that point is not mitigation anymore. We're not trying to go around and put out fires. We're now trying to perfect the system once and for all, only to then trust the system and allow the system to deal with the fires. There's a big difference there, friends, especially for us small business owners. I was talking about this very thing with our team this morning. I said, I've got an issue here that I've got to fix. The system or the process, as using our term today, the process is very good. It's moving better than it ever has. But there's 2 tweaks that I need to make in this. And I mentioned it to the team and they were like, you're right, Justin. We need to make those tweaks because we're trying to reach perfection. And there's nothing wrong with the system right now. It's doing its job, but it can be better and more efficient. So when it comes to operations, you want to think perfection. Now, for many business owners, that's dangerous because we might run into the problem of paralysis by analysis. We're trying to overanalyze something versus making an action to tweak and correct. So that's one of the risks we're going to talk about. The number 10, and this is a tip that I just added here about a week ago. It is this. Technology is very easy to blame for a problem. It is. I've done it myself. And man, if this tech would work better, we wouldn't have this problem. But the problem is often not the technology. The problem is often the operating system or the management system is too weak. And instead of blaming ourselves as business owners or the practitioners and captains of our own ships, what we end up doing is blaming a crew part on the boat. Friends, it's often not the technology. It's often the systems which need to be fixed. So with that brief overview, or that, when I say brief, it's 20-minute overview of operations, we're going to spend the next few episodes on the areas which drive value. We're going to go into deep operational reviews. And as you're listening to these, we're recording these about a week out from publication date. As you're listening to these, if you hear something, you say, Justin, I'd really like to hear you talk about this in the operations, go ahead and send me an email. Go ahead and send me an email, justin@financiallysimple.com. Actually, I had someone reach out on LinkedIn. They sent me a private message on LinkedIn and say, hey, Justin, I listened to episode so-and-so. Very good point, but you only glazed over these 3 terms. Can you go back and talk about that? I was like, you know what? I can, but I'll probably end up dealing that in the financial series and the financial parts of growing our business systems. Like, dude, that's awesome. Keep it up. So with that, guys, I'm going to say to go check out the blog, financiallysimple.com. Sign up for the newsletter. You know, we had some 100 of people sign up for the newsletter this last little bit. People are liking it. We just redid the newsletter. It's a little bit more user-friendly. I'm trying to keep it to where it's hitting all socioeconomic statuses, not just the super affluent that we work with, but also the startup business owners. So check out the newsletter. And like I say every week, life is hard, life is good, and life can be frustrating. Money doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all go out and make it a great day.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.